Nine chair Peter Costello steps down after his altercation with a journalist last week. Guzman y Gomez to raise more than $300 million when it lists, and the world's most precious stamp collection to go on sale. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Monday, the 10th of June, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, most of the country, with the exception of WA and Queensland, is enjoying a public holiday today for the King's birthday. Today's show is a little briefer than normal, but we've still got a big story to start the show. Former Treasurer Peter Costello has stepped down as chair of Nine Entertainment days after an altercation with a journalist in Canberra Airport.
Yes, in that altercation, the journalist ended up on the ground and it appeared that Mr. Costello veered into him. The journalist was being very pesky, but he was videoing it all, and suddenly he ended up on his backside. The former politician has been in charge of Nine for 8 years, and he will be succeeded by the group's deputy chair, Catherine West. Mr. Costello presided over Nine during a very turbulent 8 years. For media more broadly, advertising revenue has been shifting away from traditional media towards major tech platforms like Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. His exit was somewhat surprising, and it follows a board meeting on Friday. Of course, the CEO, Mike Sneesby, is also under pressure as a result of some of the behaviour of members of the Nine team. Nine's share price closed down on Friday at $1.40. It's down 30% this calendar year. So it's been a very, very rough trot for the organisation. For the chair, Peter Costello, who's now stepped aside, CEO Mike Sneesby is still there, but he's definitely under pressure.
Yes, John, it's probably worth a listen to an interview that we did late last week, with Tim Burrows, who is a media commentator, knows everything in the media space so well, really on the broader outlook for media companies more broadly. And Nine was one of the ones that you spoke to him about.
Yeah, Nine has really struggled share price-wise, and so I asked Tim what he thinks the long-term prognosis is for the company. It is well worth a listen just to hear what Tim reckons the outlook is for Nine and Seven, the other big one, which we talked about.
Yeah, you'll find that one in the playlist, the Fear and Greed playlist. It was published towards the end of last week. Now, Sean, checking markets thanks to Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. Where did we finish up last week?
The S&P ASX 200 closed 0.5% higher on Friday. It finished at 7,860 points. It meant the gains across the full week was 2% on Friday. It was the iron ore miners that did particularly well. They had fallen earlier in the week, but a turnaround in iron ore prices helped that along. It's pretty solid 5 days all in all. And if you take it all together, it really was the banks that was driving the market last week, helped by renewed confidence that the next move in interest rates will be down. Now, having said that, strong jobs data in the US over the weekend suggests a fairly solid economy in the US, and that sent Wall Street lower. So when our markets open tomorrow, they are probably going to be under some pressure. For all of last week, Wall Street was up. The S&P 500, very broad-based index, it was up 1.3%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq jumped 2.4%. Not a lot going on in commodity markets over the past 48 hours or so. The Aussie dollar has slipped below 66 US cents.
Sean, we've still got a fair bit to cover this morning, but a quick mention of 2 interviews we have coming up after the show. The first, of course, being Stephen Koukoulas for Fear and Greed, the week ahead. He's always excited, Stephen.
Always excited. Talk about the growth numbers last week. That was very fascinating. And what's going to happen this week with labour force numbers due out.
And then after that, something a little bit different. You're speaking with Michael Wipfli, who is better known to many people as Whipper, 1/3 of the Nova Sydney breakfast show, Fitzy and Whipper with Kate Ritchie.
A lovely fella, very entertaining. At the moment, he's really hoping to gather a groundswell of support to encourage the government to lift the age from 13 to 16 years that people are allowed to use, or children are allowed to use, social media. And it's called 36 months. That's the difference between that age of 13 and 16. He is quite passionate about the need to help kids understand themselves before they get too involved in social media. It is a great cause and well worth a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. A very good one to be supporting. All right, plenty to get through, as I mentioned, Sean. It might be shorter, but we've got plenty to cover. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Mexican-themed fast food chain Guzman y Gomez has increased its initial public offer by nearly $100 million to $335 million, and its largest shareholder will sell more of its stake.
Guzman y Gomez first flagged its $2.2 billion float plans a week ago. Then late on Friday, it said it had received a commitment from funds associated with Capital Research Global Investors to subscribe for shares at the offer price of $22 per share, according to a report in the Financial Review. The IPO offer size thus has been increased from $242.5 million to $335.1 million, reflecting also an additional sell down of about $93 million by TDM Growth Partners. Its holding in Guzman y Gomez will now sit at 26.2%. It's the biggest shareholder compared with 29.7% we'd held before the IPO. Anyway, it all just seems full steam ahead with that particular float.
Yeah, it certainly does. Now, you may have to explain this one to me a little bit, Sean. More than 100 investors across 5 continents bought Australia's first ever green bond, including 15 institutions new to Australian government bonds.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, actually. So a green bond is money lent to the government, to the Australian government, with a green purpose. It may be around housing, it may be around the environment. There are lots of things that it can be used for. Very difficult to get away often because it's quite hard to judge what a green bond is and then kind of down the line to see what sort of return you're getting from it. The final order book in this instance of the $7 billion 10-year offer drew more than $23 billion in bids, 3 times what's on offer. The Australian Office of Financial Management estimates that the issue paid a greenium of 2 basis points above nominal bonds. I better explain what a greenium is. It means investors are prepared to pay more and therefore receive a lower yield. That 2 basis points, pay 2 basis points more, therefore their returns are slightly lower for green bonds compared to traditional bonds. It basically demonstrates their commitment to a sustainable environment. And the thing about a green bond is many superannuation funds, for example, they have members who are saying, we want to invest in green products. This gives them one of those products. Hence, there's a greenium. You actually get a bit less for investing in it. 2/3 of the investors were domestic, 12% went to UK investors, 11% to continental Europe, 8% to Asia. The money will be used, in this instance, the money will be used in programs to finance specific projects to support the country's transition to zero net carbon emissions. All round, a pretty successful outcome for the government.
Also, what was very successful was your explanation just then. I followed every single word of that.
Yeah. I'm feeling proud of myself on that one.
Oh, just don't test me on anything. But even if you did, I reckon I would pass right now.
There you go.
Greenium. Is that
a greenium?
That's a relatively new term, I'm assuming.
Yes. Well, yes, I've heard of it around a bit, a greenium. So you pay just a little bit more for doing good for the environment.
Oh, I love that. And Sean, you mentioned super funds during that, and now we've got a bit of a super story. These stories are just linking together so smoothly today.
Beautiful this morning.
It's almost as though you've planned this. This is poetry. I don't think anyone's ever kind of described superannuation as poetry before.
No, possibly not.
But Australia's $3.6 trillion superannuation industry has split on the need to overhaul the controversial performance test that funds are subjected to annually, with some saying that the rules don't allow super funds to invest in nation-building exercises.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. Australian Super and HESTA, 2 of the big guys, are pushing ahead with calls for a rewrite of the rules as Treasury reviews the test. Critics claim that the test doesn't allow them to invest in long-term trends such as energy transition or social housing, according to media reports. Under the existing rules, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority publicly names poorly performing funds by measuring them against a range of benchmarks over a 10-year timeframe, as well as their annual fees. Now, the issue, that benchmark, though, how can the funds find a benchmark when they're investing in new things like public housing that they've never done before? And it may actually be a slow burn. It may take longer for them to make money out of that. So they're totally disincentivized to invest in public housing in this instance because their results will be below the benchmark and then they get shamed by the regulators. If the funds repeatedly fail to meet that benchmark, they can be barred from signing up new members. It's the benchmarks which really are the problem here. Rest Super's submission called for most of the tests to stay the same, but to add new benchmarks to cater for emerging asset classes. such as housing, public housing. Another great example is renewable energy assets. The current infrastructure benchmark doesn't adequately reflect returns for renewable energy assets. So they're the two examples. We've got housing and renewable energy assets, and the benchmarks just don't work for that. And the super funds are saying, well, you want us to invest in it, okay, but you need to change the rules so we don't fall below the benchmark.
That's a fascinating story. Turning to international news now, Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages held by Hamas since October in a raid in Gaza over the weekend, but Palestinian officials say that the raid killed more than 200 people, one of the single bloodiest Israeli assaults of the 8-month-old war.
The hostage rescue operations and an intense accompanying air assault took place in central Gaza in a densely built-up area. Israel's forces came under intense fire during the assault and responded by firing from the air and from the street, according to a spokesperson. That's reported in Reuters. Gazan paramedics and residents said the assault killed scores of people and left mangled bodies of men, women and children strewn across a marketplace and a mosque.
Finally, Sean, I mentioned this one at the top of the show. Investor Bill Gross, once known as the Bond King, is looking to set a different investment record next week when the highlights of his rare stamp collection go under the hammer in New York. I'm genuinely excited by this.
Yeah, so Bill Gross is a huge name in bond investing, probably the biggest name in the market. He has also built the most complete collection of US stamps in history, and he's putting it up for sale. Stamp by stamp, by the way. So pre-sale estimates suggest the sale could bring 15 to 20 million US dollars, which would definitely set a record for a US stamp collection. The most valuable piece is an 1868 1-cent Z grill, it's called. It is likely to shatter the record for a single US stamp, probably get somewhere between 4 and 5 million. The only other copy of that stamp is owned by the New York Public Library, according to the Financial Times. The current stamp record in the US was set last year when a single inverted Jenny stamp, named the mistaken print of an upside-down aeroplane, sold for $2 million. This would be up twice that. Mr. Gross's interest in stamps apparently comes from his mum. She bought stamps in the 1930s and 1940s, hoping they'd eventually pay for his college education. Given how much money he's made, he could probably pay her back fairly well. Now all his stamps are going up for sale.
Oh, it's a great story. Do you remember when those upside-down aeroplane stamps featured in The Simpsons? Just very, very briefly.
Yes.
Remember, I think just from memory, like Homer, I think, was going through like a big tub of things at like a yard sale kind of thing, and he's just pulling out priceless item after priceless, like pulled out a violin, reading off the back of it, going Stratohoovius, and chucked it out kind of thing, and then found a sheet full of stamps, and all, goes, no, all the planes are upside down, chucks it out. That would have to be the most famous stamp, right? I know you talk about the Z grill, but I mean, I couldn't pick a Z grill out of a lineup.
No, I wouldn't know. Yeah.
You show me an upside down plane, and courtesy of The Simpsons, I will go, that thing is priceless.
No, that one.
Yeah, I'll
definitely
pick that. All right,
good.
Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You are speaking today with Whipper Michael Whitfley, 1/3 of the Nova Sydney Breakfast Show, Fitzy and Whipper with Kate Ritchie.
All about his push to increase the age that kids are allowed to access social media from 13 to 16. It's a really great chat with a man who's very passionate about the cause.
Yeah, it is a really important one to listen to. Give it a crack. It is coming up next, as well as Fear and Greed the week ahead. You'll find them both in the playlist or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter out every Wednesday. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Monday, the 10th of June, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.